Good afternoon, everybody. As Ram introduced, I am the founder of Savikalpa Sciences, which is a phytopharmaceutical firm, phytopharmaceutical research firm. But I would also like to add that I'm probably the biggest dunce in the room, in that I am not a scientist, I'm not a physician, neither am I a clinician. And I make this point so that you may excuse any errors that you may find on the slides, whether technical or copy. I think the opening panel, as well as the subsequent discussions, deliberations, and presentations have touched upon what the future of medicine and healthy aging looks like. There is consensus that it will be a combination of personalized medicine, precision medicine, multinomic diagnostics, but I'm here to make a case for the role of general medicine at a population scale when it comes to enabling better aging, in India in particular, and hopefully around the world. And in that sense, not just general medicine, but what I would like to call very general medicine when it comes to naturally occurring compounds and their role in enabling better aging. I think everybody here is familiar with the challenges posed by inflammation at a systemic level and how that presents across various modalities in terms of diseases and the specific interventions we have to treat the same. The reason I point to inflammation, systemic inflammation, is because at a very simple level, when it comes to phytocannabinoids, we are finding that their principal function is to act as anti-inflammatory molecules. People would be familiar, again, with cannabinoids, and I think that certain compounds such as THC and CBD are very well known. What we, and when I say we, the scientific community around the world is finding is that there are very, very specific applications, therapeutic applications for some of the minor cannabinoids. And there is significant work going on around 4 or 5 primary research centers around the world looking at what some of the applications of these compounds are. At a very, very simple level, I think that there needs to be a greater appreciation of the role of the endocannabinoid system and how phytocannabinoids effectively mimic whatever dysregulation there is in the endocannabinoid system so as to enable a better regulation of body systems and how that can enable better health by improving and regulating processes like mood, sleep, appetite, and also immune response, effectively bringing the body back into balance, ensuring that there is homeostasis. I would like to point out to what are the two most famous, for lack of a better word, compounds found in the cannabis plant. And it is important to know that today about 160 odd unique phytocannabinoids have been identified, they've been characterized, but I think that there is perhaps research that exists only on 10 or 12 of them in any substantial manner. So there is a whole body of work that I believe is there to be undertaken, and I also feel that India has a unique opportunity to once again leapfrog this area of therapeutics. But very specifically, some of the properties of THC and CBD, tetrahydrocannabinol and cannabidiol, they are anti-inflammatory and analgesic activity, which is well understood when it comes to applications in pain management in particular, which is where there has been the greatest amount of at least clinical development, majoritarily in the West. But I think that there are other very, very interesting properties such as their antiemetic function. When it comes to, for example, we were speaking of cancer, the ability for cannabinoids to act as very, very useful therapeutics for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, for example. I think that there is substantial awareness of the euphoric properties when it comes to recreational use of cannabis in particular, how it is perhaps abused to get high. But if we speak about mental health and we look at what the applications are, then we understand that those very same euphoric properties can be very, very significant in enabling persons who suffer, for example, from chronic depression to enable them to a better mental state. Similarly, we understand that cannabidiol, CBD, has anxiolytic properties and therefore also helps with general anxiety. These are all sort of underlying challenges, if I may, that sort of reduce the quality of life, and therefore I believe that there is a very substantial role for there to be specific research, targeted development of phytoformulations that can really enable better living, healthy aging. There is a whole body of work which is happening around cancer and what the applications of cannabinoids in oncology are. There's some fabulous research that is happening at the Israel Institute of Technology. I'm happy to state that we're looking at a research program with the Center for Cancer Biology at Technion in Israel, and trying to see if we can do collaborative work, translational work with institutes in India, and be very happy to explore that offline in terms of how we can bring that to IISc as well. I would like to just share that a lot of what is under the umbrella of medical cannabis, in my view, does not really meet the applications of clinical medicine. We need to be able to provide compounds that can be given to persons who are cannabis naive, to populations where perhaps form factors such as smoking or vaporizing are not really accepted or are current effectively. You should be able to give medicines to people in a clinical setting, to people who are cannabis naive. Effectively, when I look at development that we're doing, I always believe that the geriatric population, let's say my grandmother, we should be able to provide medicines that can be safe, effective, have a therapeutic benefit, but also are below the threshold of intoxication. And largely, even though it might be a very large global industry today, I believe that 90% of the form factor of medicines under the umbrella of medical cannabis are still flower or some form of concentrate. And I don't really think that that meets the levels of, for example, medicines that we would hope to ascribe to when it comes to applications at a population level. I've spoken about the analgesic and anti-inflammatory activities. It is important for us when speaking about phytopharmaceuticals to also derive inspiration perhaps from some of the earlier systems of medicines. Earlier speakers spoke about Ayurveda, about the role of the gut, for example, in overall health, but also to apply obviously the standards of modern science, modern clinical excellence, so as to be able to substantiate what the activity, what the usefulness of some of these compounds are. And we've been working with various CROs in the country so as to really put down the basic science of cannabinoids and to be able to substantiate through research in vitro and also in vivo more recently in terms of what these activities are. Very specifically to be able to understand what the right dosages are, what are the right concentrations of the compounds, are there any differences again in terms of the different populations that we are using to treat some of the various underlying conditions where we feel that there is therapeutic benefit. And very interestingly, the results have been very encouraging. We did, for example, on the screen here, an in vitro investigation looking at the analgesic anti-inflammatory activity. We took aspirin as a positive control, and we had a full spectrum in which we did not isolate any of the individual cannabinoids. We took a full spectrum extract, we stabilized it, we characterized it, and we tried to understand what the efficacy, both what the anti-inflammatory activity is as well as what the analgesic activity is. And the results were quite astounding. I mean, a lot of this work that we've been doing with the past 2 to 3 years in particular is for us to build an understanding of the basic science of phytocannabinoids and to be able to then take that to development of actual formulations which we can obviously take through the regulatory pathway. But beyond the anti-inflammatory and analgesic activities, we've also now conducted, it's not on the slide here, but in vivo investigations, again comparing full spectrum cannabinoid extracts to diclofenac, for example. And again, we've achieved higher analgesic activity in a short 0 to 120 minute time frame compared to what are some of the most commonly available salts or formulations in the market. So really this is just to show that there is a whole body of work, a lot of potential in understanding what the role, not just of cannabinoids, but other natural molecule compounds is as well. But cannabinoids presents a challenge in that there are regulatory restrictions in place. And once again, India has, I think somebody said, a relatively benign regulatory regime. So if you really understand how to get support from government, then there is a lot we can do here compared to potentially what is possible in the US or other OECD markets. Because we're speaking about aging, we also have run some investigations on skin health in particular. And really, I would say that looking good is also very important, a very significant part of feeling good. And therefore, there was a suggestion that we should also look at what can be some of the, let's say, dermatological applications, but also whether those can be converted into products which have maybe a more personal care, beauty sort of application. And once again, we conducted a study in this was particularly a CBD broad spectrum formulation in which we compared the anti-inflammatory activity, we also compared the anti-inflammatory activity, but that's a separate study, but we were looking at what the proliferation of fibroblasts is and collagen production. And again, the positive control that we used was ascorbic acid, which all of you would know is probably the most common ingredient when it comes to all of the beauty products, the serums available across the entire industry. And a lot of people are suggesting that perhaps we should look at this as a line of investigation to commercialize, which can then fund some of the, let's say, pure science, basic science research that we're doing, because there seems to be a huge market for beauty personal care products in the country in particular. Very interestingly, I would like to show that we are conducting both in vitro, but also because we have a few formulations that we're able to work with a few physicians, an understanding of what the dose response is. There really is very limited understanding at the practitioner level of what should be the right dosage when it comes to cannabinoid medicine. And what we're finding is that micro doses are oftentimes proving very, very significant in achieving the therapeutic potential. And therefore, to establish that is a very, very significant body of work that still needs to be done, not just in terms of dose response, but also in terms of understanding drug interactions, in terms of understanding what are some of the contraindications. And really, once again, we believe that in India we can achieve this because there is a genuine ability for us to leverage the scientific potential and the clinician potential in the country. Just a few of these, as you would see on the screen, are some of the various studies that we've been doing. Again, this is all at an in vitro level, but again, presenting some very, very significant understanding in terms of how we can translate this for future research. Broadly speaking, I would just like to share that India is unique in that it has a phytopharmaceutical regulatory regime. There is very little that has been exploited since 2015 when this was established, but it really, to my mind, is the perfect bridge between traditional medicine, encapsulated, let's say, in the Ayush regime, and modern medicine. And by phytopharma, we effectively are looking at stabilizing 3 to 5, let's say, compounds within a phytoextract, and then trying to see what the efficacy of that particular formulation is in treating various indications. I would also like to say that when the reason I'm calling this very general medicine is because we're looking at a polypharmacological approach, that there are different compounds that are acting on different pathways and leading to different benefits at, within the body. And therefore, this is something that might prove challenging to establish IP around because, again, these are naturally occurring compounds. But because there is very significant therapeutic potential, I believe that maybe there is some kind of a commercial justification that we can achieve when it comes to this research. The most promising applications are, and I think that there are persons here who are well familiar with the fact that pain management is probably what the largest application thus far has been, but in oncology, in neurology, in rheumatology, and also in gastroenterology are where we're finding very significant, thus far at least, observations on the clinical applications. And again, consumer health and personal care applications also abound, but that is something which is outside of my current interest. So I'd limit my talk to that, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Raghav. So, open to the questions. Any questions?
So, I have come across some reports that the genetic basis of a person decides how you respond to this. What is your thought? What are your thoughts on that? Have you looked into that?
We have not researched what, let's say, the genetic variations can be and what the response to, let's say, phytocannabinoids is, but certainly in observation, in clinical observations, we do find that there is significant heterogeneity in the response of patients to the medicine. Also, obviously, in terms of some of the contraindications, some of the side effects, we do observe that certain people do respond. So therefore, an understanding and personalized sort of dosage, personalized medicine is really something that is very, very significant when it comes to cannabinoids.
And also you showed the comparison with analgesic. So how did you make that? What was your measurement? Like, was it a subjective scoring or like?
So this was an in vitro investigation, what I had on the slide earlier, and that was just on COX-2 inhibition in particular. We also looked at interleukin-6, interleukin-8, TNF-alpha, some of the markers of inflammation, and we were comparing that with a positive control, aspirin and diclofenac in particular.
So the last question you asked.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gaurang. All the products available in the market are mostly full spectrum or looking at CBD THC ratio. Are there individual cannabinoids will it be available in the future, and what about the legal aspects of it, and what about the bud extract? Is that also?
Sorry, the last bit?
All the products in India are leaf extracts, right? So
Yes.
what about the bud extracts and the legal aspect of it?
So, in reverse order, the cannabinoids present in all aspects of the plant. In India, only the leaf is legal. So there is no cultivation. The only legal route for us to source the API is from government. And therefore, for extraction purposes, effectively, when it comes to the leaf extract, we have a much larger quantum of biomass that we need to be able to get the same quantum of the extract, right? So if we were able to work with bud, if we were able to work with flower, it would just be a more efficient extraction process. But there are all of the cannabinoids expressed throughout the plant. It is just that you need a much greater quantity to be able to get an effective concentration of the extract itself. Otherwise, there is no challenge in the sense that in India, we can actually get the entire suite of cannabinoids from the leaf itself. It's just a more inefficient extraction process. To your question on ratios, I really think that a lot of this is coming from probably not a very scientific background, right? And there is a lot of application in the West on ratios, in particular between CBD and THC. And we do see that both of these compounds bind to the same receptors, and therefore they kind of act synergistically to both potentiate the therapeutic effect, but also to mitigate some of the side effects that we are cognizant of, right? But when it comes to at least in vitro investigations, we consistently find that the full spectrum extracts are proving greater efficacy than any combination of individual compounds or isolates for that matter. And therefore, purely from a clinical outcomes perspective, from a therapeutic outcome perspective, we find that the full spectrum extracts are proving to be more efficacious than any of the products or formulations that we find out west, which are CBD or THC dominant or isolates thereof.
Thanks, Raghav. Thank you, Raghav. So the